You know, when I was earning my Ph.D., I lived in Florida. Loved it. The water, beautiful trees. Seeing those things became my expectation. But then I graduated and moved for my first university job, and I didn't see those things anymore. And because I was looking so hard for what I was used to seeing, my expectation, I couldn't see anything else. For me, there was nothing there, and I was frustrated. And then someone said to me, stop looking at what you think isn't there, and look at what is there. It hit home. I study the mathematical thinking of children with learning disabilities. And some people focus on what they perceive isn't there, maybe because the children don't meet an expected way of doing or a performance score. We work to fix the kids. We try to focus on showing them what to do or how to do it. I did that myself for a time when I taught. But if we look at what is there, we can work to change that focus. You know, after I moved, I started to look at what was there. I walked the main streets of the small town and looked at the people I saw along the way, and I noticed that that view was really narrow, that I had to get out there, widen my view. In the same way, if we want to look at children with learning disabilities in terms of what is there, we've got to widen our lens. Doing that means really diving in and working to see the broad potential and knowledge that these children bring to their learning. One way that I widened my lens was using open-ended problem solving as a way to know what children know and how they think. So the problems are wide, right? Because there are many ways that children can answer them. And just kind of like an interview, I can work to listen and observe children's thinking. You know, I've used interviews now with teachers, pre-service and service in many venues across 3 states. And teachers who use these tools, these problem-solving interviews, talk to me about the abilities of their children. They're changing their focus. We're working now across disciplines to spread the news of these interview tools at national and international venues. And other researchers are now also talking about these tools to special educators to use them to build up children's reasoning. We developed our own interview to look at the fractional knowledge of children with difficulties and disabilities. And when we used it, we saw the statistical lines between difference or difficulty and disability begin to blur. It puts the competence of children in a context. Now, that's not to say that the thinking or the children are all the same. So when I study children's thinking, I see many pathways. And in my travels, some of those pathways are similar, and some of them are unique. But you know what? That's great. I think that that type of neurodiversity has really broadened my perspective of what it means to know and learn mathematics. It's given me a new sense of the norm. And as children's thinking unfolds and unwinds, sometimes in ways I don't expect, it's important to realize that it's always growing. Stu thought about fractions in a bit of a different way. He used a type of a correspondence or relationship between numbers to think about parts and wholes. I responded by using equal sharing. It's a task that's wide open to his way of doing, and his thinking grew. Jim had perceptual motor difficulties, which meant that cutting up wholes or partitioning was difficult for him, even within equal sharing. But multiple modalities, like changing up the representation or using verbal number facts, was really helpful for Jim. So he did things a bit differently, but his thinking grew. Ellie had difficulties enumerating small quantities or identifying small quantities. So before she could cut up a whole, she had to build that whole up with small units. And that type of activity helped her think about how those small units related to a whole. So that's a bit different, but that type of activity is helping her and other students who think like her think about smaller fractions like 1/2 and 1/3 as quantities by grouping those smaller units together. So her thinking is growing. You know, we're getting toward the end of the semester, and I'm asking some students in my class to tell me about the foundations of math ability and how that relates to teaching math to students with learning disabilities. And every one of them, in their own way, is telling me to work from the potential that's there, view that potential in a broad sense, and build from it. And I think that our power for further impact is here. We need to change our focus in regard to learning disability. View the knowledge that's there instead of what we perceive is not there. Then, widen our focus. Let the kids think and do. And as the children think and do, we need to keep broadening our perspective of what it means to be able, or what it means to know and learn math. You know, I think our biggest tool for change begins with what we choose to look at. Thanks.